Welcome, everyone. We're pleased to have you joining us today for volunteering with your pet horse. My name is Mary Margaret Callahan. I'm the Director of Programs for Pet Partners. Pet Partners is excited to register horses and donkeys, both full-sized and mini, as therapy animals in our therapy animal program. Although I'm not a horse owner, I am a lover of equines, and I spent much of my childhood trying to convince my parents that we could, in fact, keep a horse in the garage if only they could park their cars on the street. But I do have with me today someone who is a seasoned handler of horses. Victoria will be joining us. She's been with Pet Partners since 2008, and I'm going to let her introduce herself right now.
First of all, I want to say I am so happy to be joining Mary Margaret presenting this webinar today. Here's a little miniature bio on myself. I'm a New York, Wisconsin, California girl. I live in Malibu Canyon, California with my husband of 30 years, 3 wonderful miniature horses named Pearl, Willow, and Liberty Bell, along with 7 dogs and a duck. We have a wonderful daughter, Sophie, in her 3rd year of grad school at Brown, who has little interest in horses and has put up with them her whole life. I've always been an artist, and I graduated from California Institute of the Arts. My subject matter has always focused on animals, and it's mainly been horses and dogs. Volunteering and training with my minis has been a dream come true and has basically taken over my whole life. I'm 60 years old this month, and my mom said my first words were, "I want a pony." At least I'm consistent. I am absolutely in love with miniature horses and feel they're a huge untapped resource in this expanding field of animal-assisted therapy. My goal in this seminar is to really inspire you and help with some practical information on how to be the best mini horse therapy team you can be. It's such a great opportunity for all of us to set a very high standard, and in doing so, lead by example. Through my personal experience of being a horsewoman and a dressage rider and competitor for the past 27 years, and training and volunteering with my 3 miniature horses, I've learned there are some things you want to work on to really be prepared for every eventuality. And I'm looking forward to answering your questions and giving lots of great tips.
Thank you, Victoria. We're so excited to have you with us today. I'm going to go ahead and get things started. Just as a high-level overview, we've got a few goals for today. Therapy animal teams come in all shapes and sizes and visit in a variety of places. We're going to want to find out what skills your equines need to be good therapy animals, what kind of commitment and training you may need, and how you actually become registered with Pet Partners.
I'd like to tell you about some of the places I visit with my mini horses and some of the challenges that we come across. My main focus with my minis personally is visiting the patients at the Greater Los Angeles Veterans Hospital, where I've been making weekly visits for the past 5 years. To give you an idea of a visit in the VA hospital, I enter the main entrance with my mini and I go to the voluntary service office, where I sign in on their computer, and then I go up to the 2nd floor in an often very crowded elevator where my mini needs to move quietly to the side and stay very calm and still. Then I meet my rehabilitation specialist, Heather Hills, in her office, and off we go to see patients in their rooms. Other places that I volunteer include a VA medical center where I visit hospice patients, a lockdown psychiatric ward at the VA, the Long Beach VA Spinal Cord Injury Unit, and a VA Hospital Rehab Center. I also visit an at-risk youth center in South Central LA where kids read to Pearl. I go to nursing homes for the memory impaired, and also California Lutheran University during finals week for their de-stress before the test. I also do school presentations with students, and I've done a key point presentation about helping our veterans with miniature horses. I'm really, really excited because next week Pearl and I will be visiting the children and their families at Ronald McDonald House in Pasadena. And then in August, Willow and I are scheduled to be at their Los Angeles location by Children's Hospital. You can really see there's such a wide variety of places you might be able to volunteer in your community. And the idea is really to find the right fit for you and your mini. Mary Margaret mentioned that some visits are directed by medical staff, specifically animal-assisted therapy. An example of equine-assisted therapy that I've done is working with a rehabilitation specialist with a stroke patient. I used my mini horse Belle with a patient that had had a stroke and lost the use of one of his arms. By strapping a brush onto the hand that wasn't working, he practiced using his other arm that functioned to support the arm that lacked strength and coordination to brush Belle. Now, having a horse to practice this task kept his mind off feeling awkward and frustrated, and it really became fun for him. The rehab specialist was very happy with his progress, and we've been doing this for several weeks. What I also notice is that when patients see the little horse picture up on the hospital rehab schedule, they really look forward to the visits. We go to every doorway and see who wants a visit from the mini horse, and then visit each patient bedside. I would really say about 95% of the patients, they want a visit, no matter how in pain or depressed or badly they're feeling. The patients often have IV lines, they might have bandages, they're recovering from surgery or going for surgery, so you really need to navigate not contacting these areas during interactions. Visiting with my mini in the hospital is really a balance of being totally proactive and aware every second, and on the other hand, totally calm and loving and open to listening quietly to the patient. It's all about helping people have a meaningful, positive, and often spiritual interaction with your wonderful horse. Mary Margaret asked me to comment on if horses are always welcomed in all facilities. And I will say that there can be resistance sometimes. It was a dream of mine to be able to visit the veterans in the hospital. This was going to be a first for them, and I could tell it wasn't going to be easy. I was new at all of this, but I just kept putting one foot in front of the other to get closer to my goal, and I felt like a trailblazer. After doing the VA orientation they have and doing all their paperwork and fingerprinting, I eventually received my badge, which I was so excited to get, and was given my first test. The voluntary staff started me at a VA patient family fair and placed me, if you can believe it, between a dunk tank and a ball toss. Pearl was a cool cucumber because I've trained with a huge amount of desensitizing. After hanging out at our pet therapy booth, I walked around the fair visiting as many people as possible, trying to educate people about pet therapy and have them meet and spend time petting Pearl. It was baby steps from there in the hospital and getting the staff used to the idea of allowing a mini horse in their units. I made sure Pearl was house trained and immaculately groomed. I have to tell you, this means everything to the hospital staff that is so concerned with hygiene and safety. They can count on us for every visit, and so they have confidence in our abilities and presentation, which then helps them respect the animal-assisted therapy. We are really setting a standard that will open doors for other teams, but we all have to maintain this standard to be allowed in the hospital. I really feel it's a privilege to be able to visit patients in the hospital with my little horse. I deal with opposition to my minis by discussing the benefits of animal-assisted therapy and the attributes of my miniature horses, how loving and sweet and magical they are. And I also talk about how I bathe them, and I have them clean and beautiful before every visit, and they are 100% potty trained and extremely well trained. And of course, being an example of a professional equine team is one of the best ways to win over people.
Thanks, Victoria. We'll go through a few little housekeeping things about Pet Partners before we hear more specifics about equines from Victoria. Pet Partners does register a variety of species, of course, including equines, both horses and donkeys, both standard sized and minis like Victoria has. I want to remind everyone that as we're going through this presentation, you can chat any questions that you have in the questions window, and we're happy to get to those either during the presentation or at the end when we'll have some question and answer period. A good question to ask yourself if you're interested in potentially registering with your horse is to make sure that you meet all the eligibility requirements for Pet Partners. So we'll go through a few of these specific to equines. If you're interested in registering with other animals, this information is available on our website, petpartners.org, or you can certainly ask questions. We're happy to answer. Your equine has to be at least 1 year old and needs to have lived with you as the owner for at least 6 months. As Victoria has alluded to, horses do need to be reliably house trained, and we will talk about that more. We don't allow animals to wear waste collection devices, regardless of whether they're visiting indoors or outdoors. All animals, including horses, have to be on a lead at all times, and for the safety of your animal and the people you visit, you want your animal to be in good health and free of internal and external parasites. This includes animals should not be on antibiotics, antifungals, or immunosuppressive medications, but once they complete those medications, they're welcome to participate in the program. We'll talk a little bit more about some basic training requirements that animals should have, and some good obedience skills, and Victoria's prepared some tips for us about things that she's done to train her minis that she thinks any equine trainer would find useful if you're interested in pursuing animal-assisted therapy. So, like we've mentioned, in addition to enjoying people, good therapy animals accept interactions in a pleasant, forgiving, and welcoming manner instead of just tolerating them. They demonstrate good body language and interest, and they're very responsive to their handlers' cues, and that's a big piece, and Victoria's got some great stories and suggestions around that as well. So let's hear from Victoria again. Victoria, could you tell us a little bit about what kind of special skills or qualities you think horses that participate in this work have? And I know the burning question on everyone's mind, how did you potty train your minis?
Okay, Mary Margaret. Well, I'd like to tell you what I think might make picking what type of characteristics are great for mini horses if you're looking for a potential successful partner. these are all my personal ideas here, and I have, with the potty training, I have what's worked for me. So here we go. Personally, I look for a mini with a calm and inquisitive and sociable temperament. One that really wants to come up to you and be pet. And I want them independent, but not too independent. So if you're picking a foal, you see it running around the pasture at warp speed, and it doesn't check in with its mama, that one is not for me. He might end up being a little too hyper. If he comes over and hangs out and gets pet and rubbed on and then trots back to his mom, that shows me there's a good balance there. I look for a foal that is small, which is great for maneuvering in hospitals and other crowded facilities. My minis are 29 inches and under at the withers. And I also want a cute, colorful, lovable, sweet horse that I'm going to want to look at and care for its entire lifetime. Because let's face it, these minis are family members. What I want in a mini might be very different than what you want. And these are all personal preferences. And maybe you are more comfortable with a larger mini to work with more outdoor visitations. People also find great rescue minis that turn out to be perfect partners. Personally, I like to pick my minis when they're a few weeks old and start training them at home right after they're weaned. And I like to start loving them up and desensitizing them as soon as possible. Desensitizing is so important for a horse that is going to do this work. You want a mini that is not spooky and isn't oversensitive to its surroundings. This is also part of the owner's responsibility in the training, and I'm going to talk more about that later. I would be very, very cautious in attempting this work with any mini with behavior problems, even with lots of training. When you're out visiting, you don't want some old issue to rear its ugly head. You want your animal to inspire confidence in everyone it meets at all times. I also like a smart horse with some energy you can direct into the training, and then it's motivated to learn. My minis love to learn because we have a lot of fun, and I train with all positive reinforcement. I totally believe in treats. I reward any effort with verbal praise, rubbing, or a treat. And I personally use Timothy pellets in a pouch, which is very, very easy to carry. And sometimes I use all three rewards. All right, let's talk about potty training. To me, this is one of the most important skills a mini needs to learn. No matter how much the staff at the Veterans Hospital loves the visits from Pearl, Willow, and Belle, if they were to poop or pee in the hospital, we would not be allowed back. I've heard this from doctors, nurses, and staff, and it's through my 100% track record over the past 5 years that they allow me from the ICU unit to the chemo clinics. When I visit carpeted nursing homes with carpeted elevators, pooping or peeing is not acceptable. In my opinion, any mini can be trained. I really believe that, and I'm happy to help anyone any way I can answer any questions about this process. We need to prove across the board and across the country that this can be done, and I'm here proving it and here to help you be successful. We are all pioneers in this field, and that is so exciting. Okay, here's my disclaimer. What I'm about to share about potty training did not come from a book or a video. My training concepts are an accumulation of my life experience with horses, and for me, this simple technique works. Some big points about potty training: consistency, repetition, patience, and reward is everything for success. Consistency, repetition, patience, and reward. I train now using a clicker because you can click faster than fumbling for a treat. Timing is everything with training, for any type of training, and marking the correct behavior or the slightest effort with a click and a treat gets amazing results. I didn't train Pearl with a clicker, but I have found with my younger minis this has been a more effective, clear way of training. And I also reinforce Pearl's training now using a clicker. I always wear a pouch with treats and a clicker on my finger or wrist. Believe me, it becomes second nature once you start using it. You are the one that decides how far away from the treat bag your mini should be. If they're too close, back them up, make them stay, and then they can be rewarded with a treat. I feed my minis 3 times a day and always at the same time. I think feeding at the same time and having everything very regulated and the same amounts really helps this process. After feeding, I put their halters on and walk them to the same spot every time and give them a verbal command to go potty. I basically use pee-pee and poo-poo, not very original here, but you could use any word as long as you always use the same word. That's really, really important because the same signals, repetition, clicking, treating, they really get it. Even if they already relieve themselves, give them the opportunity in the same spot, same words, and then just be patient. Sometimes if you just wait with them there in the same spot, they'll come through for you, and it's great. Make a very big deal out of it. When they're older and they are potty trained, you don't have to do this after they eat every time, but you do want to keep reinforcing the process very regularly. If you see them anytime starting to go potty naturally, anywhere they are, anywhere they're allowed to relieve themselves, quickly give them the verbal command and then click and give them praise and a treat. So you're actually capturing their natural behavior as well as reinforcing it with the treat and the word. They really need to know that they can count on you for potty breaks and at regular intervals, and then they start to learn to hold it. So if you keep everything very consistent and you repeat this, you do this daily, I'm telling you, they really learn the process. I am constantly reinforcing their potty training with the same game plan. After I groom them, while they have their halters on, and before we go for a walk or a ride in the car, I ask them to go potty. Most of the time they do, just from being in the wash rack for a little while getting ready. As soon as I take them out, I ask them to go potty. So if we go for a drive, they're in the car. Even if they go potty in the car, I take them out. They never pee in the car. They only poop in the car, just so you know. But I always take them out immediately and let them go and give them a pee-pee command. These are always the same words and a treat and praise. When I graze them on safe grass at least 30 minutes every day, I think this is really good for their digestion and keeping everything moving, besides, of course, having fresh water daily all over the place for them, so it's easy water access, so important for them. When I bring them back to the corral after grazing on the grass, I put them in the same spot and I ask them to go pee-pee and poo-poo, and I wait quite a while, and they usually do. When I put them in stalls at night around 10, before I put them in, I ask them, it's just reinforcing, I ask them, do they want to go? They usually follow me to their spot to go potty one more time outside. They really get to know this is the drill, and horses learn fast if you're consistent and logical and fair. Then I give them each some hay pellets in their stall so they have something in their tummy at night. On Tuesdays when I go to the VA hospital, it's the same routine. This is my routine. Breakfast in their outside stalls. When finished, the minis are loose in their corral. Groom whichever mini gets to go visit that day. A potty break before hopping in my Honda. Then I drive 1 hour to the hospital. And at a certain point, while I'm driving, believe it or not, I tell them to poop on their shavings. They're so used to the routine, they always poop. And the minute we get to the hospital, I take them to the same spot on the grass to go pee-pee, and they go. And as soon as I take them out of the hospital, they always want to stop us and pet them and take photos, but that's just not fair to your horse. It takes so much focus, and there's so much stimulus in the hospital that they deserve to go immediately to the grass to go potty. You just have to keep walking and politely say, I'm sorry, she's on her break. This is about being your horse's advocate. Because of all this training, they pretty much go whenever and wherever I tell them. There's no magic to this, I promise. I'm just consistent, positive, and fair, and I have fun with them. I make a big deal about it, like they're geniuses for going potty, and they get a treat. This is a general overview of the way I potty train. I hope it wasn't too boring, and I keep them being potty trained so I can totally count on them, and they can count on me for breaks. Every piece of training helps create the most wonderful, magical bond with your horse. Everything you do with your horse is teaching them really something good or bad, no matter what it is. When the horse doesn't understand, it's our fault. We're not being clear enough, or we're asking too much, and they fail. If my horse is not understanding something, I don't keep drilling. I redirect, and I ask something different or easier so I know they can be a success. This builds their confidence, and then they don't get frustrated with the learning process. You have to keep it fun for yourself and your horse. Be creative. Most of all, every piece of training, grooming, playing, and exercising helps strengthen the bond and connection between you and your horse. And all of this will help you be an amazing and successful equine team. And we'll have more time at the end. If you have any questions about the potty training, I can answer them after.
As you can tell, Victoria is an amazing handler because she's done such a commitment to training her animals to be successful. And that's what we're going to talk about really briefly, is that the primary role of a handler is to be your animal's guardian and be your animal's best advocate. Means you get to you're responsible for making the decisions about what is and is not appropriate during any visit. Excuse me. So it's your job to make sure your animal's in good health, properly groomed, and is enjoying the interactions with the people that you're visiting. All of our registered therapy teams are volunteers committed to working in their community and promoting animal-assisted interactions. Once you're registered with Pet Partners, you're able to approach facilities in your own community where you can offer to volunteer as a therapy animal team. As Victoria shared, she volunteers in a wide variety of places. And as she also alluded to with the VA hospital, sometimes you'll need to follow volunteer requirements of the facility you choose to volunteer, such as completing a background check or a volunteer application, or even potentially other health requirements or additional trainings. As a Pet Partners volunteer, you get to decide where you visit and how often you visit. Some people visit often, once a week. Some people visit less frequently. Visits never exceed 2 hours a day, but you also need to remember that anytime you do go on a visit, you're going to need to set aside some time to prepare for your visit through bathing and grooming. And of course, bathing and grooming of a horse, for some people, feels like a pretty labor-intensive investment in time. You'll also want to reserve some time after the visit so that you can unwind and relax with your animal. So, Victoria, every picture I've ever seen of your 3 minis, they are just gorgeous. Can you tell us a little bit about your grooming routine that you do?
Thanks, Mary Margaret. I'd really like to share some of my grooming tips. I love to groom, and I think it's a really special time between you and your horses to bond, and they love grooming. So, and I do have some tips from my experience over the years I'd really like to share with everybody. I regularly body clip my horses, so no matter what the weather is, they always have a chance to dry and not get a chill with their long hair staying wet. And also, it's really hard to keep a horse very clean if it's not body clipped. I have a variety of blankets, different weights that I use through the year to cover the minis depending on the weather, because they're always body clipped. Daily grooming is essential to a beautiful, shiny coat and healthy feet. I clean my horse's feet before and after I exercise them, which I do daily. I do it before to get any manure out, and after to make sure they haven't picked up any rock or pebbles or something even worse. I curry their coats with the rubber curry, and then their little legs with the rubber mitt. And this really exfoliates their dead skin. Then I always go from stiff brushes to soft brushes to brush off any dirt, debris, whatever, and this really helps bring out their natural oil in their coat. I use a mane and tail brush on their long hair, but I always brush from the bottom, just like if you have long hair, you brush from the bottom and work your way up so you don't pull hairs out. Grooming gives you an opportunity also to take daily inventory on any possible little cuts or swelling or bug bites your mini might have. Personally, I love to play music and when I'm grooming, and I think the horses even like it. I bathe my mini every time before a visit without fail. Because I volunteer so much and I have to bathe so much, I liquefy the shampoo so it's not so strong. And I add a conditioner into the shampoo and something called Skin So Soft that I'm sure some horse people have heard about that's by Avon. And a lot of the horse stores actually carry it. And I mix this right in with the shampoo and conditioner. And Skin So Soft is also a natural fly repellent. While my horse is still damp, I spray her all over with Show Sheen, which is a detangler, and it also adds shine and helps keep the dirt off their coat. I know I sound like an advertisement, but it's really great stuff. And there are several other good products just like Show Sheen that are available. And I usually put a sheet on her to keep the dirt off until her visit. And this way, those elevator doors close, the people aren't smelling a barnyard animal. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry about that. Let me turn that off. And they just see this beautifully groomed and friendly little Pegasus ready to go on rounds. I regularly wash all their grooming supplies by throwing everything in a bucket with Clorox, and I let it soak for a while, and then I thoroughly rinse everything out of it. I also wash their blankets regularly, because if you have a beautifully clean mini and then you throw on a smelly blanket, guess what you're going to have? Very stinky mini. I'm constantly cleaning the stalls and corral, and I also keep my corral filled with rice hulls, which drains beautifully, and it helps keep the minis very clean. I recommend using fly masks and sheets if you have flies, so they don't get eye irritations and bites, especially in the summer months. I usually don't put a fly spray on my horse because they go into so many hospital situations and they really don't want some kind of chemical repellent on your horse. I keep separate halters that are just used for volunteering. And the minis really understand when that pet partner's harness and their special halter goes on that they are going to go visiting people. Personally, I try and dress very neat, but always comfortable, and I always wear rubber-soled shoes. The one time I decided to wear my cowboy boots, I slipped in the main lobby and I landed on my back, but I never let go of Pearl. And Pearl, of course, is just looking at me like, how embarrassing, Mom. It was very ridiculous. Anyways, only rubber-soled shoes for me. Now you and your beautifully groomed miniature horse look fantastic, and you're off to make people happy together. It makes such a huge difference wherever you'll visit to look professional, act professional, and feel prepared. This is part of being the best equine pet partners team you can be, and you are setting a great example.
Thanks, Victoria. Let's see. So Pet Partners doesn't train animals. You get to select the methods that are best suited to you, and Victoria's given a lot of wonderful, great training tips. But I did want to mention a couple of basic obedience and good manners that equines need. This includes things like walking on a loose lead near your handler, being comfortable, being handled and touched all over their body, remaining calm amid distraction or in crowds, being reliably housebroken, being able to walk past other animals without becoming aggressive or fearful, and not being nosy, sticking their head into people's bags or waste paper baskets or things like that. Those are some of the key obedience skills that you might find that you need with a horse who's going to do this kind of work. Now, there are a few things in addition to some of those basic skills that Victoria has found through her visiting are useful things. And I've seen when we get to questions towards the end, there's questions about things like elevators and things like that. And Victoria's got a few tips here about things that would be helpful to practice ahead of time if you were interested in becoming a therapy animal team with your horse. So Victoria, take it away.
Okay, Mary Margaret. Here are a few of my personal training ideas that might help you to become a successful equine therapy team. And I do talk about elevators a little bit there. The whole goal is to be safe and prepared for every possible situation, and to know that you and your horse will remain calm and in control. For me, training is all about consistency, a lot of love, patience, repetition, and lots of praise and treats. The goal here is to have your mini really prepared to be a successful partner, and it does take a big time commitment, but I believe these results are more than worth it. The idea in training is to keep it simple and to train in short intervals every day using the same words and signals for your cues. Keep it simple is a biggie. Remember, if your horse is not understanding what you're asking, it's probably your fault, not the horse's. Go back to a simpler task where your horse can be successful. Again, you want to build your horse's confidence and trust in you so that you're not asking them to do something that they're not capable of doing. You don't want to frustrate your mini. You want them to want to learn and make the training fun for you and your mini. I have some suggestions for skills your horse should have before you start visiting. They include accepting touches anywhere on their body, staying calm amid distractions, any kind of distraction, walking on a loose lead right next to you, backing up both directions and moving sideways both directions, and riding in elevators, and also training to leave it no matter what it is, because especially in the hospital, people might have food on their gowns or lines in their arms. Whatever it is, you might have to say leave it, and you want your horse to know what that means. Desensitizing your mini to anything and everything you can possibly think of is the best daily exercise you can do. When I begin with a foal or any mini, I start by going over them with my hands from head to toe, not leaving out any part of their body, no matter how sensitive. This means getting them used to rubbing their ears, opening their mouth, massaging around their tail, and being able to move their tail around, the base of their tail around, and which sometimes they want to tuck underneath them, but you want them to be able to relax and move it and rub under their belly and all their ticklish spots. Lifting their feet and tapping on the bottom of their hooves and rubbing all the way down their legs. This takes constant positive practice, so eventually they'll let you or other people that want to pet them all over not react or be too sensitive by throwing their heads up or kicking or biting or any kind of adverse behavior. Sorry, my dogs are barking. If they are super sensitive in any one area, you give them lots of praise or a treat when they do stay calm and still. But don't avoid touching that area because they're sensitive. If anything, work a little more gently and massage that area and get them used to that it's okay. Or if they're ticklish, that they don't have to be so ticklish, and just massage it maybe a little more, and then let them know that if they stand perfectly still, they'll get the treat. Desensitizing is also important for environmental factors. Here's a biggie in my opinion, and I learned this from also in dressage, riding dressage. You go towards the scary stuff and don't avoid anything. Equines are herd animals, and you have to be their leader at all times. You keep walking towards anything your mini is apprehensive about, and any forward step your mini takes should be rewarded with a treat or a phrase or a rub. Actually, I always click. If they take one little step towards the thing they're afraid of, I give them a click and a treat. And they keep walking forward because they end up focusing on the click and the treat. They forget what they're afraid of. This idea is always to build their confidence and make them feel they can handle anything, and you will also protect them. This training's invaluable because if you're in a tough situation, your mini will stay calm and focused on you and not what's going on around them, and react out of their survival instinct to protect themselves. I walk up to workers that are jackhammering. We follow noisy trash trucks, leaf blowers, including the stuff they're blowing in the air. Don't avoid anything. I don't I go towards the barking dogs. I give them just a treat for standing there, and even when the dogs keep barking, it's so great for them. Yelling kids, if I'm at a park and kids are running towards them, I just keep the minis focused on me. I talk to them, I give them a treat. The kids all run at the same time. They want to pet them, and you just make a little extra effort to just keep them calm, and then they just learn all this commotion is no big deal, and they just get a treat for standing there. I set up balloons and waving flags. You can even do that around their corral. We walk on sidewalks or paths by heavy traffic, and any kind of stimulus to where nothing bothers them. Anything you can think of, go for it. I'm just thinking now, when getting them used to clippers, sometimes you start by just hanging the clippers while they're running near them. You don't touch them with the clippers to start. You just let them run. And then maybe you hold the clippers in your hand while it's vibrating, and you run your hand holding the clipper next to them, and they feel the clippers, they feel your hand and not the clipper, and you give them a treat, and it's just tiny steps, and just everything is trained one step at a time with praise and treats. When walking your horse, the goal is to have some slack in your lead and to have them always stay by your side and focused on you. To practice this, I walk them by your side and get them used to being right at the same point on your side in the same position. When they're young, you might have to be more animated and super exuberant to keep them walking until they get the idea. Maybe shuffle your feet a little, take bigger, shorter but animated steps, and use lots of praise. Then say whoa or ho or whatever word you choose, and always ask your mini to stop facing forward and by your side. When you give a treat or praise, they should stay in that same position with their head relaxed and forward. Then have them stay in the same position to get the treat. If they move, just back them up or walk them forward to the same spot and then give them a treat and praise. You don't want them moving around for a treat. Backing up and moving sideways from both directions are extremely important skills. The goal is to be able to have control and be able to maneuver your mini easily in all directions. Again, this helps create a very safe mini. When I first asked my mini to back a few steps, I might take the lead under the horse's muzzle and just give a little check, a little pull backwards and down, and the verbal command. And then I reward and praise for any effort. You can also, if you're standing in front of them, you could just press on the bridge of their face towards their muzzle and just press back a little and say back at the same time, and then let them take a step or just even the start of a step. Any effort gets a reward. Also, the energy and the position in your body also helps give them direction. So if you feel your intention, if you know what I mean by me saying this, if you feel your intention and your energy move towards them, if they're backing, if you're in front of them, that also helps them move backward. The goal is to use the least amount of effort by you for the biggest amount of results with your miniature horse. When I start my mini learning to move sideways, I stand in front and a little off to the side, the direction I want her to move away from. I gently touch the soft indentation in front of the hip, so hopefully she moves away from the pressure. If they move into the pressure, you add more pressure until they yield the tiniest amount, and then I rub that spot and I give them a reward. Soon they'll move over from the slightest amount of pressure, or just by bringing your hand towards that spot and not even having to touch them. When I'm in an elevator with one of my minis, I just say, over, and I put my hand toward my mini's hip and over she goes. If I point with my finger backwards and say back, she'll move backwards. And actually, I really can do most of my cues without even having to use a word now. But it's good to be able to use either one or both. The training is one step at a time, always trying to refine your cues to achieve maximum results. And depending on where you may be visiting, practicing in elevators is also important. You don't want to try this out at a facility you're visiting for the first time thinking your calm, quiet, perfect horse will be perfect in that crowded elevator. Every mini reacts a little differently to that feeling of the bottom falling out from underneath you, which can be very disturbing. Also, being closed in that small space with strangers can be uncomfortable. Try and find yourself an elevator that's available and not being used. At first, I practiced just going in the elevator and going out with rewards. Even if it's a step into the elevator, 1 foot and going out, because sometimes that little space that they see going into the elevator can actually be scary too, especially if you're a real tiny mini. So you practice going, and then you practice when you get that so they're comfortable going in and out before you move on to going up and down 1 floor. Once you get them going up and down 1 floor with rewards and praise, and you might need to talk to them a lot while they're doing that the first few times, and keep them very interested in you, that everything's okay, and give them a treat. You do everything in increments. When your mini is calm and comfortable with doing this, then since you've already taught them to move over, you can now have them move. You can now have them move from one side, and then another time maybe to the other side. Remember, if something's not working, go back to an exercise that he was doing successfully, and then try this again. But don't ever drill. Drilling doesn't help. Drilling just gets them frustrated. You can also train them walking up and down steps or ramps and getting in and out of vehicles. I first always start with a ramp, and then when they're used to it, then they hop in and out on their own. You might have to initially lure them with a treat to do any of these things. So maybe just take one little step at a time, or just partially put a foot up and down. Really, the tiniest effort gets a reward, any effort in the right direction. And you build on every little exercise. And then you end up with this huge vocabulary of great training, things that you've trained them to do. For teaching them to hold still during petting, I hold my hand out flat vertically, and I say visit or pet, and they come up to my hand to be pet and not move, and I give them a treat. And I start this by touching the front of their face with a flat hand and saying pet, or whatever word you want to give, and then give them a reward. And you just repeat this many, many times, and then you take a little step back and say pet, and they'll start coming towards your hand. And you just increase the time that you're asking them to be pet and increase the space that you're walking away from them. And then you can also ask someone else, ask a friend or relative, and ask them to say, could you put your hand out and say pet? And then practice being the handler and your horse going to the visitor to be pet. This is the same with hugging. People will want your horse to hug your horse when you visit. And so I start with a quick hug while saying hug, and then if they don't move, I give a reward. And then you increase the hugging time and make sure you stop asking them and reward them before they start to move. And when your mini does something wonderful, don't keep asking it to repeat the same exercise. Move on to something else. These are some tips that I think you'll find helpful, but I'm happy to answer any specific questions at the end.
Thanks, Victoria. We're gonna move on to talking about some of the nuts and bolts for actually registering. We're getting close to the end of time, so if you have to leave us at noon, we totally understand. This is recorded, so you'll be able to see it if you miss on the last few minutes. We'll also take any questions that we don't get a chance to answer and send out those answers, questions and answers to everyone who attended today. So if you have a burning question that we haven't gotten to and you have to leave at noon, don't want you to worry. We're happy to still answer those. And if you're not here for the live answer, you'll get a typewritten response that you can review in your own time. So there are 4 basic steps to becoming a therapy animal team. Taking the handler course, which you can do either in person or online. Having your veterinarian attest that your animal is healthy. Completing your evaluation with you and your horse. And then submitting your registration. The handler course that you can take either in person or online really concentrates on what you need to know in order to be a successful handler, including the policies and procedures for pet partners, safety considerations, and a variety of pieces that we think makes pet partners handlers the most professional in the field. The animal health screening is to make sure that, you know, your animal's health and safety is important and tantamount in this program. So your veterinarian signs this form that indicates that they are in good health, and that, just as a little aside, all horses do need to be vaccinated against rabies. And they should not be taking any antibiotics, antifungals, or immunosuppressive medications in order to participate. The evaluation process is a test of you and your animal. It's basically like a role play, imagining what it would be like if you were on a visit and what things you might experience. There are 2 portions. One is more of skills and obedience test. Some of those things we talked about, like walking on a loose leash and being able to walk past a dog without showing any either fear or aggression. There's also a second portion of the test that is about aptitude, where you will have your animal encounter medical equipment, for example, or crowds, or people moving or speaking erratically. And then once you've completed these pieces, you simply put all your pieces of documentation together and submit your registration to Pet Partners. I'm going to go straight to questions because we have just a few minutes left. Victoria, there was a burning question about footwear for horses. Could you very briefly talk about what you have your horses, if you have your horses wear any kind of non-slip shoes, and what you do and how you get them to fit properly?
Sure. I've been through so many different types of shoes, I can't even tell you. I have found if your mini is a good size mini, a lot of people use Build-A-Bear shoes, and they have so many different kinds, and they actually work really well. If you have tiny minis, a tiny mini like I do, all of those are too big. So I finally found a company called Ruffwear, R-U-F-F Wear, W-E-A-R, and they're for dogs, but they come in so many different sizes, and you can just measure both directions of the bottom of your mini's feet, and they're just very easy to use, and you just pull them on and then you Velcro them around, and they're very comfortable, and they've got some tread on the bottom that's not too heavy, but they actually last a super long time. So out of all my hunting personally, I would say for the bigger minis, Build-A-Bear shoes, but these rough wear shoes are great. They're not cheap. They're definitely not cheap. I think they're about $70 for, or $80 for the 4. But they do last a super long time. And if you can get the Build-A-Bear ones to work, they're like $8 or from, very inexpensive for 2. So that's what I would recommend.
Great recommendation. If for those of you who are able to stay a little bit longer, we'll continue to do some more questions. If you have to leave, we understand. Not to worry, all these questions will be captured, and we'll send them out to all of our attendees. So Victoria, I think I have a couple other questions that might be of interest to a variety of people here. We have several questions about what kind of treats that you use, and do you ever worry about your horses or minis mistaking, say, fingers or for treats, or getting a little bit nippy when they're visiting? So could you talk a little bit about what kind of treats you use?
That is an absolutely great question, because a lot of people think if you use treats, they're going to be nippy. This is absolutely not true. They don't have to be. It's just like everything else. You train them not to do certain things. If they're being nippy, you can back them up, not give them a treat, and redirect their energy into doing another task. They don't get rewarded if they're being too pushy about a treat. They have to learn. They stand still and stay relaxed, and then they get their treat. I always use Timothy pellets because I actually use that for their feed, that and other things, but they are happy as clams with Timothy pellets, and they're little, they're clean, they're easy to take, and I keep them in like a big Tupperware container in the car, and I can add more into my pouch and if I need them. And I just always wear a zippered pouch in my little fanny pack with wipes, a plastic glove, whatever. I always have a little bit of everything I might need, and pictures that I give away of the minis, because I like to give a picture to every person when I leave them from the horses. And I always have my Timothy pellets. Also, when I'm visiting with people, I'm very aware of what people, if they're carrying food, where their fingers are going, and I never let other people feed my mini either. So if they want food, they're going to go to me. They're not going to go to someone else, because I think that is the most important reason not to let other people feed your horse. So they know you are the treat person, and then they don't think someone else is going to give them a treat. And I think that really helps with them not being nippy. If it's something I'm very concerned about, I will have my hand by their muzzle. Just, someone can pet them very nicely without being right at their mouth. You might want to if you're concerned about your horse, just move your horse around, which is another reason you want to be able to maneuver your horse very well, so that you can have it a little more towards, so they're petting the neck and the top of the head, and not, position them more towards the shoulder, so they're not just sticking their fingers in their mouths. But lots of times, like with Pearl, I'll have my hand in front of her muzzle, and that's perfectly fine.
Excellent advice. Thanks, Victoria. I had a couple comments about people picked up on how you said that you had your horses in your Honda, and there's a question about how is it that you transport your minis in your car, and how does that work?
Um, this is, minis go in all kinds of vehicles. Personally, I have a Honda Element, I call the Promobile, and I took the back seats out, and you know, they're very square and kind of low. I don't even think they make them anymore. Ford actually makes something that I think is square and kind of low. But I took the back seats out, I put a rubber liner in it, and I put shavings in it. And they hop in the side door like dogs, and they just hop into the back, and they basically stand there with their head poking over on my shoulder while I drive. And I put like a little separator, a canvas separator across the back, so they don't try and ride in the front seat with me, which they probably would like to do. I also, that's if I take one. If I take 3 horses, or I have a big Sprinter van, and I have stalls set up and all kinds of stuff in there. And that is fantastic. It's also our emergency vehicle for where we live. And to take all our 7 dogs and the horses and feed and all of that in there. But if it's just 1 or 2 horses, I can pop them in my Honda, and it works great. I also saw someone driving one in a Volkswagen bus with little wood separators. I mean, you can, depending on the size of your horse, I used to have a horse trailer because of my big horses, and I put Pearl in there when I got her, and I just thought, this is ridiculous. She's too small. I went around the block, brought her home, and I'm like, no, I'm not doing the horse trailer. So if I drive in my van, they're right behind me in 3 stalls right behind me in the van, or in the Honda.
I can only imagine passing you in traffic.
It is fun.
Victoria, I've got another question here, and this goes back to when we were talking a little bit about potty training. It says, how much time would you say you give between potty breaks? And I assume that means while you're training.
If they're young, not that long. When I'm training them, it might be 20 minutes. When I first started my young ones visiting the VA, I just said, excuse me, I have to go outside. Whether I thought they had to go potty or not, I took them out and gave them an opportunity, because I just didn't want them to have an accident and have that in their computer chip. So I went back in the hospital, and, so I would say start with, I'm not kidding, 15, 20 minutes. Just, you want to be successful. You can always stretch, go back into a facility. It's better to go out and take a break than to have a potty accident. Now I can go with Pearl and go in for longer than an hour. But she's been doing this for a very long time and is very solid in her training. But I would say, and my other ones are 2 years and a few months, and they can go in for an hour. But I am really on this potty training, and they live in my backyard, and I'm with them a lot. So I would just, the shorter the time length, the better. But also, people sometimes think you need to withhold food and water. I never ever do that. Never. I don't. It's more important to keep them on a regular schedule, but let them know they're going to have a break.
And in that same vein, Victoria, we have a specific question about when you do take them to your potty location, how long do you wait for them to go?
I would say no more. Well, I mean, you could wait up to like 5 minutes. I wouldn't wait longer than that.
Great.
Or just a couple minutes. I mean, they get really, it's amazing, but I would say wait 5 minutes, but they do start to learn. People will be so surprised at how this is not like magic, potty magic. This is really a trainable skill.
And then one last question about potty training is, at what age did you start potty training your minis?
Oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember. I just start everything as soon as I get my minis at 4 months. So, and I have not had an older mini that I just haven't had that experience of having an older mini and then starting the potty training, because my personal experience has been with from 6.5 months starting training and starting training at 4 months. Because I like to be the one imprinting all the information, and I don't want, if you have the opportunity to start with a young horse, unless somebody's training it somehow for you, I think it's the best thing, because then you're not dealing with other people's information, you know, programmed into your horse, if possible.
I've got a question here, Victoria, that says, have you ever been in a facility when the fire alarm sounded? And I don't know if you have, but maybe you could share something about sometime where you experienced some sort of an emergency or something like that.
I actually have a little story about a patient. Yeah, let me share something. I was in a room actually with 4 patients, and one of them fell going to the restroom. And his walker went flying, and he hit his head on a wall, and he wasn't moving. So all kinds of bells went off. Staff came running, a crash cart from all directions with equipment, and I was with Willow, and Willow and I just calmly moved against a wall, which is actually where they wanted us. There wasn't time for us to get out of the room or space to even exit the room. And Willow never reacted to the commotion, and we stood calmly and quietly until the patient was back in bed being checked over by the doctor and staff. The patient was actually very upset and embarrassed when he came around that he had fallen down, and he didn't want everybody making this big fuss over him. And he was very agitated. And his doctor asked me to bring Willow by his side to help redirect his energy and help calm him down. And I really love that Willow was so calm, and that my training with all that desensitizing paid off, and also that the doctor had confidence in the benefits of the equine therapy. But I have to tell you one more thing. Last week, there was a fire drill in a nursing home I was in, and it was a memory impaired, it was a residence for memory impaired individuals, and people got very confused, and they had to shut the doors and shut us in this upstairs room, and we had like 3 floors of people there in this group we had. And it got very warm, and it got very stuffy, and the residents were also getting, the ones that could mill around started to mill around. We had a lot of wheelchairs and walkers, and the idea, I felt like we totally helped calm the situation down, and this was a very, I have to say, warm, crowded. The fire alarm was so loud, and your horse and you as a handler can actually be a very helpful team at that time, calming the residents down. And because you desensitize and go around as much noise and chaos as you can, training them, when you're in a situation like that, you and your team will be very calm and safe, and also be able to help others.
That's excellent. Great stories, Victoria. Thanks. It's 12:15. If people want to hang out for a couple more minutes, I think we'll do that. At some point in time, Victoria's daughter is going to come home, I think, and want to see her mom. But we'll maybe do a couple more questions. And again, any questions we can't get to live, we'll come up with written responses and get those emailed out to everyone who attended. Victoria, we've got a couple questions that are sort of similar, not identical. One, it has to do with an individual who has 2 horses in pasture, and the question is, do you remove one horse to train, or do you train with both horses in the pasture? And the other one is that a woman who's got a mini whose companion sour and whinnies for other horses when she leaves the property, and it takes her a while to relax. And so questions about how you manage that and keeping a horse quiet while they're visiting. So I don't know if there's anything you can contribute there, but.
Okay, you might have to, let me see if I'm remembering everything correctly you said. When you have 2 minis, I have the 3, and I feel it's really important to work them as individuals. I know Pearl will always compete to be number 1. She's the boss of the other 2. And if I'm training them, Pearl will want them to be out of the way and for her to be the one getting the treats and being the smarter one. And it's like kids. It gets very competitive, and I don't mind tying 2 up so the other one can actually almost be an observer. And then they know that they each get a turn. And I would maybe what I do is I groom them all, and then I might leave 2 tied right there, and then work them as individuals. But you're going to be visiting as an individual. They have to learn that they go off on their own, and the more you work them separately and they figure out they're going to survive not being with each other for that length of time, the better it is. So it's better to start in the training and not just when you're off going to visit. Also, the horse that I leave at home, I always give them a treat. I leave them with a treat when I take the other horse, because the horses actually learn that, wow, that one is going to go visiting, and they want to go too. The horses love to go. The ones that really enjoy doing this, they want to go. So the other ones, you don't want them to feel like they're being punished and staying. So you want to leave them with a treat so it's not so bad. Give your other one a treat maybe when they get in the vehicle, and off you go. But the horses often cry for each other when you separate, but that's one reason I give them each a little food when they're separating, so the separating almost becomes a positive instead of a negative experience. Now, anytime you're with your horse and they're feeling insecure, stressed, it's all about redirecting their energy. So if they're feeling stressed, give them a job. Ask them to do something. You can teach them a little trick. You can teach them to smile. I can talk about that at another time. You could teach them to give a high five with their leg and then give them a treat. Just keep them busy. Keeping them busy is always a great way to get their mind off the thing they're stressed over. Did I answer those questions?
I think that's fantastic. We've got a couple other questions. We've had a few people ask where you get a couple of the different resources that you were referring to, specifically the fly sheets and masks, where you get those, and another question about the rice hulls that you use.
The rice hulls, I learned that from a neighbor who's like in her 70s, who's fantastic, who's been doing horse stuff her entire life, and she uses them in all her turnouts, and I started using them. The only thing with rice hulls, and I want to be really clear about this, my minis end up eating too many of them because they're just fiber. But sometimes they get tummy aches if they eat too many rice hulls. If they, sometimes when the rice hulls get a little older, they don't taste so sweet, but when they're in the mood to eat them a lot, I throw a little muzzle on them. They can still get a little rice hulls in it, and they can drink through the muzzle. It's just a horse muzzle that you can get online, but I put those muzzles on my minis so they don't end up chewing on rubber mats or eating other things in the corral. The rice hulls, you can get at any horse feed store. Most horse feed stores have them, or you can they can order them for you, and they come in big bags like shavings. What else?
Excellent. And what about fly sheets and masks? Would you have a recommendation for where to get them?
I do. I have a Ozark Mountain mini tack, and I get everything online, and they'll tell you how to order everything, because stores really don't carry much mini stuff. And looking for my catalog. I'm sure it's called Ozark Mountain. Another one is Star Lake Tack. Here it is. Ozark Mountain Mini Tack and Equine Supplies. And it also says minitack.com.
Excellent. And we'll put that in writing for anyone who didn't capture it or didn't have something to take notes on, and send that out.
You want a phone number, or no? I'll give it to you later.
We'll put it in our notes. That's a great one.
Okay. Perfect.
Hey, Victoria, I have one more question, and I know that you've done this, so I think it's a great opportunity. Someone asked, have you ever tried to train your minis to follow a target like your hand? And I think you've done some touch training, have you not?
Oh yeah. My minis I've actually taught to do tons of tricks, because it's just fun. I just spend a lot of time with them, and they do a huge amount of tricks. I can point to a pedestal, and they'll go stand on the pedestal. I have big rubber balls, like yoga balls, in my corral, and I say push, and they learn to push the balls, which when I work with at-risk kids, and not with either at-risk kids or kids with different disabilities and challenges, they'll be sitting on the ground, and I can actually have my mini push a ball to them, and I'll push the ball back to Pearl. And that's a very fun thing to do. But you start very close, and maybe you point with your hands, and then you could even put a treat on that toy, and when they go to get it, you give them the command like touch, and you click. That's just one idea. Most of these things I just make up as I go along. I mean, there's really, a lot of it is very logical. Like I put my fist out, and I'll go touch, and they'll go to my fist, and then as soon as they touch it, I click and give them a treat. And you just then put your hand up in the air in a different position and say touch, and then you hold something out in your hand that you're holding and say touch. Anything, even a bandana. You could teach them to take like a bandana out of your pocket or something by holding the bandana and telling them touch. And then, you can start learning you build on things one little step at a time. And that was a big point I tried to make through this whole webinar, is minis love to learn. But you have to start tiny with little exercises, one baby step, just the way we learn things. And then you build on each exercise. So you end up with this great repertoire of skills. But you start small, but the more they learn, the more they want to learn, and the quicker they learn.
That's excellent. Thanks, Victoria. We're approaching 12:30, and I am so thrilled to see how many people are still interested and excited and staying on this webinar, but I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So I'm going to answer one last question myself, and then we'll bring this webinar to a close. Someone asked, are there really that many minis registered with Pet Partners right now? And actually, equines are the third most popular animal registered with Pet Partners after dogs and cats. We're seeing a large growth in horses, which is one of the reasons we wanted to do this webinar. Please let people know that if you have other friends, horse owners who are considering this webinar will be recorded and available for them to watch at their time. You know, as you pursue your training and potentially registration with Pet Partners, we hope that you'll encourage other people who are interested in doing equine-assisted therapy to find out more about Pet Partners. We love having equine teams as part of our Pet Partners family, and we're just so delighted that you were able to join us today. I think you'll join me in thanking Victoria for sharing her amazing experiences. She's been with Pet Partners since 2008 and really has done so much visiting and has so much experience, and we were fortunate to be able to benefit from all of that today. So Victoria, on behalf of everyone, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Mary Margaret. I loved being part of your webinar.
Well, thank you everyone who joined us today. We're going to end the presentation now, but you can look forward to an email that will let you know when the recording is made available, and we'll follow up with any questions that you didn't get a chance to hear the answer to. So thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.